The silence inside the mansion was deafening. A place once filled with laughter, music, and the light steps of a carefree young girl had turned into a cold hospital-like space. The CEO, a man known across the country for building empires and making impossible deals happen, sat helplessly at the foot of his daughter's bed. The accident had taken more than just her ability to walk, it had stolen her spirit. She lay motionless, her eyes staring at the ceiling, refusing to speak, refusing to hope. Doctors from the best hospitals in New York, Boston, even Europe had come and gone, shaking their heads, offering complicated terms, and leaving behind bills that even his billions couldn't erase from his heart. He had fought wars in boardrooms, but this was a battle he couldn't win. Every night he prayed, something he had not done in years, but every morning the same reality met him: his little girl remained paralyzed. Meanwhile, in a small coastal town in the Philippines, life was simple but not easy. A poor single father worked as a carpenter, fixing boats by day and caring for his young son by night. His wife had died years earlier, leaving him to raise the boy alone. Though he had nothing in terms of wealth, he gave his son everything he could: love, guidance, and a faith that tomorrow could always be better. The villagers often came to him for help, not only because of his skill with his hands but because he had inherited from his grandmother a gift of healing, a way of calming pain through touch and words of comfort. Unknown to him, his path was about to cross oceans. The fate of a broken American family and a humble Filipino father was about to collide, changing all of their lives forever. The first time the CEO heard about the Filipino man, it sounded almost ridiculous. One of his housekeepers, a quiet woman who had been with the family for years, whispered it to him after she saw him break down in the hallway. "Sir," she said gently, "there is a man back in my province. He is poor, just a carpenter, but people say he has a gift. He healed children when no one else could." Maybe, she hesitated, afraid he would dismiss her words. At first, he did. How could a billionaire place his daughter's life in the hands of a man who fixed boats and built furniture? Yet as night after night passed with no progress, and his daughter's small hands remained cold in his, he began to wonder if perhaps the answers he sought lay not in more money, but in something beyond it. With quiet arrangements and against the advice of his board and even his relatives, the CEO sent for the man. The journey was long. The Filipino father and his little son traveled with nothing but a small bag of clothes and a wooden cross the man carried for strength. When they finally arrived at the massive mansion, the difference was almost painful. Chandeliers sparkled above their heads, polished marble floors reflected their worn sandals, and staff stared at them with suspicion. The CEO himself greeted them, his eyes tired, his pride bruised. The father did not bow, did not seem intimidated by the wealth that surrounded him. Instead, he walked straight to the girl's bedside. He didn't speak to the CEO first, he didn't speak to the staff. He knelt by the girl, who turned her head weakly to see this stranger. In a soft, steady voice, he said, "Child, you don't know me. But I am here for you. Not as a doctor, not as a rich man, but as a father. And I promise, we will fight this together." For the first time in months, her lips quivered, almost as if a smile. The knock on the grand wooden doors of the mansion was soft, almost hesitant, yet it carried the weight of something far greater than anyone inside expected. The CEO's assistants had rolled their eyes when he mentioned inviting a poor Filipino single father into their home. They whispered about his desperation, about how ridiculous it was to bring a man with no medical degree, no global reputation, no expensive machines, into a house that had already seen the best doctors in the world. But the CEO was out of options. Pride had long been his armor, but now it was crumbling, and the only thing left was the love for his daughter. When the doors opened, the man who stepped in looked nothing like a healer. His clothes were plain, worn from years of labor. His hands were rough, marked by the life of a carpenter. His young son followed closely behind, holding onto his hand, his wide eyes staring at the gleaming marble floors and golden chandeliers as if they belonged to another universe. The assistant scoffed quietly, but the father walked forward with quiet dignity. He did not bow to the power of wealth or the intimidating aura of the mansion. He went straight to the girl. The CEO's daughter, lying on her bed with a blank stare, barely noticed him at first. But when the single dad knelt beside her, his eyes softened, filled not with pity but with understanding. He whispered in a gentle tone, "Child, I am not here to cure you with riches or science. I am here to help you stand again, not only with your legs, but with your heart." For the first time in months, her lips trembled, not quite a smile, but a flicker of something forgotten. Hope. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion slowly transformed from a house of sorrow into a place of fragile hope. The poor Filipino father devoted himself entirely to the paralyzed girl, not treating her like a patient, but like a daughter who needed to be reminded of life. Each morning, he prepared herbal oils sent from his village, gently massaging her hands and legs while softly humming the folk lullabies his grandmother once sang to him. At first, the girl resisted. She turned her face away, afraid to believe that anything could change. But his son would sit beside her bed, telling her funny stories about the sea back home in the Philippines, and her lips began to twitch in laughter she thought she had forgotten. The doctors dismissed his efforts as coincidence. They muttered about false hope and wasted time, but the CEO could not ignore what his own eyes witnessed. His daughter's pale cheeks grew a little rosier. Her fingers, once frozen in silence, twitched when the man placed a carved wooden toy in her palm. Each tiny movement felt like a miracle, and the CEO's heart cracked open with emotions he had long buried beneath his pride. He found himself drawn to the sessions, standing quietly at the doorway, listening to the soft melodies, watching as his daughter's eyes lit up with sparks of determination. One night, as the house lay in silence, the Filipino father spoke to the CEO. "Your wealth brought many doctors, but healing is not only of the body. Sometimes, the spirit must first be lifted before the body can follow." The CEO, a man who had once scoffed at anything beyond science, lowered his gaze. For the first time, he whispered, "Teach me." And in that moment, both men knew, healing was no longer just for the girl, but for them all. The day of transformation arrived quietly, without announcement, but it carried the weight of destiny. The sun streamed through the tall glass windows of the mansion as the Filipino father helped the girl sit up once more. She had grown stronger over the weeks, not only in her body, but in her spirit. Her laughter, once lost, now echoed through the halls whenever she played simple games with his son. That morning, the father placed his hand gently beneath her arm and whispered, "Today, you will stand. Not because your legs are ready, but because your heart is." The girl trembled, fear flashing in her eyes, but then she looked at the boy who had become like her brother, and at the father who had become her second guide. She took a deep breath and pressed down with her feet. At first, her knees wobbled. Her body shook. But slowly, she rose, inch by inch, until she was standing, leaning on the father's steady arm. Tears flooded her face, but this time they were not from despair. They were from victory. The CEO, watching from across the room, dropped to his knees, his face buried in his hands. A man who had once believed money could solve everything now realized that the greatest gift had come from someone who had nothing but love to give. He rushed forward, hugging his daughter, then embracing the humble father with words choked in tears, "You gave me back my child when all the world's riches failed." The CEO offered him money, houses, anything he wanted. But the father only smiled and said, "I did not come for riches. I only ask for one thing. That my son may have a chance to study, to dream beyond what I can give him." The CEO nodded through his tears, promising the boy a future brighter than either of them could imagine. In that moment, two families, one wealthy, one poor, were bound together not by contracts or wealth, but by love, sacrifice, and the miracle of humanity.